Story analysis is great and all, but the real question is the color of my shirt positive or negative? Hello, and welcome to It Is That Deep. My name is Amber, and on this channel, we're going to dig in and explore deep analysis of books, movies, and TV. Today, we're going to be talking about media literacy and where analysis matters and where it doesn't. I'm going to address this primarily through the 1991 animated Disney movie, Beauty and the Beast, and a silly Tumblr post. As an important warning for this video, I will be talking some about the dynamics of abusive relationships. I'm not going to go too deep into specific examples, and it won't be for the whole video, but I will talk about some general concepts of the way relationships like that work. As such, even though the main movie covered here is a kids' movie, some of the more serious aspects of this discussion likely aren't appropriate for young children. And then, as for the more typical warning, spoilers! In this video, I will reveal varying levels of spoilers for the following: Beauty and the Beast, Dead Poet Society, The West Wing, Pride and Prejudice, K-pop Demon Hunters, Fight Club, Breaking Bad, and Paper Towns. Yes, I promise these are all relevant to my point. All right, let's dig into it. Once upon a time, someone posted this image to Tumblr. The resulting conversation was a Tumblr kind of conversation. So our local children's hospital recently redecorated, but I'm not too sure they really thought things out. Literally any other color would have been a better choice, guys. I'd like to point out that the color red has more positive than negative meanings. I'm sorry, but this reply absolutely killed me. Red can mean whatever the heck you want it to mean. That is never going to change that this straight up looks like they dragged a bloody body across the floor. Hi, fun fact, colors do have meaning, and there's a legit thing called color theory. Red does have more positive connotations than negative, like Minty Maiden said. Red is associated with more love, lust, and passion than blood and death, just like the chart shows you. But if you want, here's a link for you to check it out yourself. Also, check out The Designer's Dictionary of Color by Sean Adams. Have fun learning something. I think y'all are missing the point here. You could theorize to Nebraska and back, but that doesn't change my immediate reaction, which is that someone is literally dragging a corpse around. I like that the presumption here is that no one on Tumblr has heard of color theory. Let me explain in depth, rather than simply acknowledging that the visual effects of this particular choice, applied in the manner it was, can still amount to, this is a hospital and that looks like blood. Like, color theory doesn't exist in a vacuum. If your design of choice for blood red paint is asymmetric splatters and splotches against the wall, or in this case, a snail trail on the hallway's floor, an infographic won't override the viewer's instinct. I love Tumblr. Color theory is absolutely a thing and can provide some really cool analysis. I took a class when I was younger that at one point talked about color theory and how it's used in advertising. Different colors get different reactions and suggest different connotations, which then subtly influences our buying habits. It's one of those things that once you see it, it's kind of hard to unsee. At least for a while anyway. At some point I forgot all the details I learned in that class and went back to buying things like a mindless sheep. But with color theory and design, you aren't supposed to notice it. It's supposed to just affect you on a subconscious level. So color theory absolutely exists, which no one here is disputing. But sometimes context paints a different picture that influences things more than red is more likely to be positive. Red can be positive when it doesn't look like blood. But with the context of it being in a hospital and the streakiness that I can only think was intended to be like a kid's crayon drawing, the main connection most people's brains make is to the association red has with blood. I'll get into how this applies to media literacy in a little bit here. The 1991 Disney movie Beauty and the Beast is based on a French novel written in 1740 by Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve, as well as taking inspiration from the many variations on the story that were written over the years since. In the Disney version, the story starts with the backstory of a selfish prince who, after scorning an old beggar woman who offered him a rose in exchange for shelter, is cursed by the same old woman who is actually an enchantress in disguise. She turns him into a beast and enchants his servants, with the only chance to break the curse being his learning to love and receiving love in return. Over the years, he loses hope and becomes an angry recluse within his castle. In the movie, it says the magic rose will bloom until his 21st birthday, but also one of the servants, Lumiere, says they've been waiting for someone to break the spell for 10 years. So doing the very complicated math here,
I was 11, Uncle Peter.
Given the art of the prince at the start of the movie and the painting he has of himself in the West Wing, I'm just going to go with there was something of a time freeze involved in the spell. Continuing on. We are then introduced to Belle, the book-loving daughter of an eccentric inventor. Both of these factors set her apart from the rest of the town, as she feels alone and disconnected from those around her. One person in town, Gaston, has taken an interest in her solely based on her beauty, and is intent on marrying her, even though Belle is not at all interested in him. The story begins when Belle's father plans to go to a fair to show his new invention, but gets lost in the dark on his way there and stumbles upon the Beast's castle. The enchanted servants welcome him, but the Beast isn't so happy with him being there and locks him up in his dungeon. Belle discovers what's happened and manages to find the castle as well, where she offers to take her father's place as the Beast's prisoner, which the Beast accepts. Over time, the Beast and Belle develop affection for each other. However, Belle mentions that she wishes she could see her father again, so the Beast allows her to use his magic mirror to check on him. She realizes that he is sick and out in the cold because he has been looking for her, so the Beast tells her she should find him and take care of him. He tells her that she is free and is no longer required to stay there with him. When Belle returns home with her father, they discover that Gaston has laid a plan to force Belle to marry him. Part of his plan is claiming that her father is insane for believing that a beast had captured Belle, so Belle uses the mirror to show the townspeople that the beast is real. Unfortunately, when Gaston sees the affection Belle has for the beast, he uses this as an opportunity to rile up the townspeople to go kill him. This culminates in a fight between Gaston and the beast. Gaston dies, but not before mortally wounding the beast. As the beast dies, Belle confesses her love for him, unknowingly breaking the spell. The beast is healed and reverted back to his human form, along with all of his servants, and he and Belle live happily ever after. Now here's the questionable aspect of the story. Given that Belle was the Beast's prisoner for much of the movie, and it's during that time that she develops romantic feelings for him, many people have asserted that Belle has Stockholm Syndrome. So we have to ask, is this movie actually a good story for kids? Does it teach harmful lessons to its viewers, especially those of impressionable ages? Does Belle actually have Stockholm Syndrome, and should we really not be romanticizing this story? Let's talk about it. So here's the argument against Stockholm Syndrome. If you do think the story is problematic, don't yell at me, at least not yet. I'll get to you soon. To start with, Stockholm Syndrome actually isn't a condition listed in the DSM-5. The event the syndrome references is a bank robbery that happened in Stockholm, Sweden in 1973, where Jan Erik Olsson took 4 bank workers hostage for 6 days. Partway through the robbery, he was joined by another criminal, Clark Olofsson. The name of the syndrome was coined by psychiatrist Niels Bejerot to describe the actions of Kristen Enmark, one of the bank workers. Bejerot was there working with the police while they dealt with the hostage situation, but he never actually ended up speaking with Enmark. She has spoken out on her perspective in interviews with others, though, and she paints a different story from the one that Bejerot did. The main reason Bejerot assumed there must have been some abnormal psychology at play was that she and the other hostages later refused to testify against their captors. Enmark maintains even 50 years later that she did not feel any affinity for her captors during the robbery. The issue was that she and the other hostages were very upset with the way the Swedish police and government handled the situation, as the hostages feared for their lives more from the chaos they caused than from the basic situation of being held captive in the bank. Enmark stated that she cooperated and spoke calmly with her captors simply to stay alive. Okay, so Stockholm Syndrome may not be a real phenomenon, but traumatic bonding in abusive relationships absolutely is. And it's maybe what a lot of people stick the Stockholm Syndrome label onto. Traumatic bonding is a way in which a victim of abuse, whether between romantic partners, parent-child relationships, or other close relationships, feels an emotional attachment to their abuser. It happens due to the cyclical nature of abuse. Tension builds, an abusive incident happens, the abuser apologizes, and the two go through a honeymoon phase, until the tension begins to build again, and around it goes. The apologies in the honeymoon phase can be enough to make the abused person feel connected to their abuser and filled with hope that maybe this time things will really change. As the cycle repeats, the hopeful emotions are heightened by a sense of desperation, making the attachment that much stronger. Over time, this erodes the abused person's sense of self and pulls them deeper and deeper into their connection to their abuser. To go back to the movie, though, it could be argued that Belle doesn't show the typical signs of someone with traumatic bonding: loss of self-esteem, loss of confidence, anxiety, and that the movie and their relationship isn't actually about that. The most compelling positive argument I've seen about the relationship is that they were two outcasts who found comfort in each other. To start with, there's the entire Belle sequence at the beginning of the movie. The entire song is about how her beauty is basically her only redeeming quality, but aside from that, she's considered an outcast. She's so pretty that Gaston wants to marry her, but that's not enough, because pretty much the whole town is gossiping about how weird she is, thanks to her sin of being a woman who reads. As for the Beast, when Belle's father meets him, we have this interaction.
What are you staring at?
Nothing.
So, you've come to stare at the beast, have you?
The conclusion the Beast draws is that he's being stared at for being so ugly and monstrous. And we also saw how Belle was being stared at for being distractingly pretty. While seemingly at two ends of the spectrum of staring, ugly versus pretty, in reality they're being stared at for the same thing. They just don't fit in. The main focus of the song Belle is that, sure, she's pretty, but she's weird. The Beast is considered ugly, yes, but it's really the shocking nature of something inhuman inhabiting the castle and growling human words at Belle's father. Also, he's scary.
We don't like what we don't understand. In fact, it scares us.
That's really what it comes down to. They're different and the townspeople don't like it. So when Gaston takes one look at the Beast and decides to start telling wild stories about how he's going to eat the townspeople's children based on nothing, and Belle makes her argument in his defense based on actual personal experience, the townspeople believe Gaston. Gaston and Belle are both considered attractive people, but Gaston is socially accepted, whereas Belle is not, so they take his word for it over hers. Okay, so that's the theory, the color theory, if you will. But here's why that doesn't completely matter. It might matter a little, but this is important. This story, both the old fairy tale and the Disney version, has done actual damage to people, and we can't overlook that in favor of interesting analysis. I, and probably many of you, have seen the intent versus impact discussion online. I've seen some people take it to the extreme that only impact matters and intent doesn't matter at all. I don't agree with it to that extent. I think intent does matter as well as impact. As a low stakes example, if you bump into someone and they fall down, it does make a difference if you just weren't looking where you were going or if you intentionally rammed into them. That probably makes a difference in their emotional reaction. But either way, that person still got knocked over and probably physically hurts, so you should still apologize and help them to their feet. Intent matters, but having good intent doesn't make a negative impact not negative. The impact problem with Beauty and the Beast lies with the fact that on the one hand, the Beast shows lots of danger signs that a real relationship would in all likelihood not end well. But on the other hand, the Beast does change and it does end well for them. There's a dissonance between what the movie shows and what would probably happen in real life, and that impacts people in real life and their approach to relationships. So let's break that down. At the start of the movie, the Beast really is truly awful. It's bad. For one thing, the servants are all terrified of him. They can barely say anything to him for fear of upsetting him, even if it's something completely reasonable like this.
Master,
What?
since the girl is going to be with us for quite some time, I was thinking that you might want to offer her a more comfortable room. Then again, maybe not.
The Beast does follow that suggestion, but it's a common theme that the servants flinch and hide when he gets upset. He barks orders at Belle about staying out of the West Wing and joining him for dinner, even explicitly saying that's not a request. When she then understandably refuses to come to dinner, he throws a huge tantrum, ending with him screaming at her that she can just starve if she won't eat with him.
I'm just fooling myself. She'll never see me as anything but a monster.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're being monstrous. When the Beast finds Belle in the West Wing, he yells, throws things, and breaks things while she flees in terror. I do understand Belle wasn't supposed to be there, and the Beast was maybe a little scared about what she was about to do with that rose. He wouldn't want this situation after all, but that doesn't excuse breaking things and being scary. The servants regularly talk about him losing his temper, and Belle refers to it the same way, but I think it's dangerous to call it that. There's a great book on abusive relationships, Why Does He Do That?, written by abuse counselor Lottie Baycroft. You can see my copy is well loved. It points out that abusers don't have an anger problem, they have a control problem. People like this act this way because it gets the results they want, and they feel entitled to do so. In the movie, Belle pushes back and doesn't let him get his way. And this next part is crucial. Because the Beast actually has limits and wants to change, this works out. That's not how things generally work out in a real relationship that involves someone like the Beast. I will say that even in healthy relationships, there are moments where someone might say something unkind or do something selfish, and putting your foot down in that circumstance is a good idea. A healthy partner will realize their error, back up, and commit to doing better. But in a relationship with a controlling or abusive partner, they aren't likely to be willing to hear your objection, and they may even punish you for trying to raise one. In the movie, we see several times how Belle's kindness surprises the Beast and inspires him to be better. When she offers to take her father's place, he appears shocked that someone would be willing to sacrifice themselves out of love like that. After the incident in the West Wing, she leaves but is attacked by wolves, and he follows her and saves her life. They then argue about what happened in the West Wing back at the castle, but afterwards she thanks him for saving her life, and they have a soft moment together. When they eat together, the Beast starts by eating messily while Belle uses a spoon, so he tries, unsuccessfully, to use a spoon as well, until she kindly meets him in the middle and they drink from their bowls together, for which he appears grateful. Personally, I'm a big believer in kindness being helpful in many situations. A good example is how it can affect the toxic sludge of internet arguments. Anyone who's been anywhere online where there are comments knows that things can get mean and aggressive fast. But when someone is willing to kindly correct someone with, I don't know if you were aware of this, but, or be humble in response to correction and say, oh yeah, that's my bad, I didn't have all the information. Almost immediately, everyone in the virtual vicinity feels better. Sometimes others will chime in about how this is the nicest thing I've seen on the internet in forever, because people on the internet can be mean. There are definitely times where you need to firmly say, no, you are being harmful, you need to stop, or make use of the block button. But in general, I think kindness is good for the world, and we could use more of it. But a major component of changing things on the internet is the fact that most people getting bullheaded and mean online are not that way in real life. There's something about getting behind a keyboard and not seeing the person you're talking to that makes people forget they're talking to other actual human beings. A little bit of kindness shocks them into remembering, oh wait, I'm not that person. What am I doing? But there are some people who will just spit on that kindness, and those are the people you block. Those are also the same people who tend to be cruel in real life, and no amount of kindness will fix the situation. So this is where Beauty and the Beast runs into trouble again. In a way, Belle's love fixes the Beast. He cares about what Belle thinks, and ultimately about Belle herself, so he lets her influence him for the better, which is great. That's something a partner in a healthy relationship would do. But most people who act like the Beast does at the beginning don't have that attitude toward their partners. People who act like this and feel entitled to act like this can't get loved out of it. They need professional help, such as from an abuse counselor, to change their deeply ingrained attitudes. I absolutely do believe that people can and do change over time. My husband and I have been married for well over a decade, and we are definitely not the same people we were when we met. I certainly hope we're better people than when we met, but no, we did not stay exactly the same. But when we decided to get married, neither of us thought of the other as a work in progress, or had the thought, well, they're pretty bad now, but I can fix them. We were happy with each other as we were then, while still being fully aware that we would change as we aged. Ultimately, you shouldn't go into a relationship thinking, well, maybe they'll change. I'll just wait till they get better. It's downright dangerous to do so with someone who has been cruel, violent, or scary. No amount of kindness or love will fix an abuser. But come on, it's just a kids' movie, right? Except that I've met multiple people who have internalized the idea that they can fix someone and encourage them to become their inner royalty, including one person who outright described their relationship as being like Beauty and the Beast. And those relationships have never ended well. Now, yes, it is true that most people who watch Beauty and the Beast at least don't consciously apply it to their relationships, which is good. But like the use of color theory in advertising, these types of stories do affect people in subtle ways. Others might be influenced to have the I can fix them attitude without even realizing it. I think the analysis of outcasts who find each other is great and really thought provoking. I personally do like the movie, but it's also a bit of a color theory in the children's hospital situation here. You can theorize about how they fit together so well, which is the positive connotations of red. But the bloody trail in front of us is the people who have been harmed by internalizing, I can fix them. But is this always a media problem, or is it a media literacy problem? I think there are some stories that really only get positive lessons if you do some mental gymnastics, but when you look at them honestly, they're problematic. In my last video, here, I talked about Dead Poets Society. I said there that I love it, and I do. But there's a subplot that I don't so much. A character, Knox, has a crush on a girl he meets early in the movie, which I touched on very briefly in the video. He says he's in love, but he expresses that love by stalking her and bulldozing her boundaries. He has the attitude that he's seizing the day like their teacher told him to, but we can look at this from the outside and recognize that it's actually quite bad. There's another scene in the movie where the teacher has to firmly correct a different student, Charlie, for pulling a stunt at the school that risked him being expelled. He tells him the stunt wasn't daring, it was stupid. While he says this to Charlie, not Knox, it could be argued that Knox is being stupid when he thinks he's being daring, and their teacher wouldn't approve of that either. But then again, this movie came out in 1989, and this was unfortunately a fairly common presentation of romance from that era. It's entirely possible that the writers did not see a problem with Knox's actions, or at most that he was being maybe a little stupid but mostly daring. This possibility is supported by the fact that Knox does get the girl in the end, and doesn't seem to learn a lesson about why his actions were wrong. I think it's perfectly valid to consider how the lesson of Charlie applies to Knox as well, but it's also important to recognize that his actions presented here, and many similar actions in other movies, especially romantic comedies, can influence a culture of young adults to believe that this sort of thing is romantic and will lead to the relationship they want. Again, I think intent does matter, and in this case, his boundary crashing seems to be intentionally presented as being romantic. We should also be cautious of doing mental gymnastics to force a negative lesson out of a story that, when looked at honestly, is really probably okay. While not an example of people in real life misconstruing a story, there is an in-universe moment in the TV show The West Wing where this happens. The show follows characters that make up the presidential staff in a fictional White House, and at one point in the show, for some complicated reasons, the First Lady, who is a medical doctor, has had her medical license suspended. When asked about it in an interview, she says that she is just a wife and mother, simply meaning that she is presently not practicing medicine and is focusing on that other part of her life. However, some citizens get very upset over the idea that she might be saying that being a wife and mother is inferior to her career as a doctor. When two members of the president's staff discuss the situation, one confesses he doesn't see the problem in the First Lady's remarks, and the other responds, "You have to want it." As a more humorous example, there's also this joking online interaction. "If you're reading this, I love you and I believe in you. This just in, OP hates the illiterate and the blind." Sometimes things really are problematic, even in subtle ways, as I mentioned previously, and those deserve to be critiqued. But we should be careful not to intentionally twist something truly harmless into something it's not, because we want it. So is Beauty and the Beast in this category of mental gymnastic stories, in either direction? Personally, I think either way requires a little bit of bending, or even just closing your eyes to the evidence of the other argument. I don't think the intention of the Disney writers was, look how romantic it is that he yells and breaks things. But I think we are supposed to see his change from that as romantic. And that's a trope we've seen a million times over in a million different ways, from Beauty and the Beast to Pride and Prejudice to K-pop demon hunters. There's something romantically enjoyable for a lot of women about a man doing something bad, realizing he did something bad, and then doing something to really fix it. The question with each of the stories I just listed is, just how awful is he? What is he repenting of, and is it enough to merit the heroine's forgiveness? Do his penance and his story's end balance the scales of the bad things he did? In Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy is at worst stuck up, but perhaps more just socially awkward. He's initially unpleasant, but not irredeemable by a long shot. In the end, he and Elizabeth overcome their problems and live happily ever after. In K-pop Demon Hunters, the part villain, part love interest Jinu was actually a bad person in his lifetime. While he at first lies about it to the main character, Rumi, it is later revealed that he sold his soul in exchange for riches and abandoned his mother and sister to die in poverty. Much worse than Mr. Darcy. He does gain some form of redemption, but part of that is sacrificing himself to save Rumi. He doesn't get to ride off into the sunset with her. Rumi and the audience get to recognize that he was awful and would not have been great boyfriend material, while he at the same time doesn't have to end his story as a villain. His sacrifice balances the scales while not flippantly absolving him of the awful things he did. So in Beauty and the Beast is somewhere in between Mr. Darcy and Jinu. He was selfish and even violent, but he gets the Mr. Darcy treatment in his ending. Is that fair? Is that too romanticized or simplified? Are we meant to accept that someone as violent and scary as he was at the beginning can safely become relationship material? And that's really where the issue lies. No, it's not meant to be romantic that he is as bad as he is at the start. But it is supposed to be romantic and even reasonable that Belle would allow him any sort of chance to prove he is anything else. And the result is his profound change. In fiction, the writer determined that would be the ending, and so it was safe for Belle to do this. But in reality, to quote Maya Angelou, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So Beauty and the Beast has a questionable lesson, or at least a worrisome impact, and Dead Poet Society has a lesson that takes some mental gymnastics to get past. But there are other stories that really are saying something really interesting and even positive right there in black and white. But for whatever reason, the audience misses it badly, changing the story's impact from its intent. My prime example of this is Fight Club. It's a book by Chuck Palahniuk that was made into a movie directed by David Fincher in 1999, and has some really cool things to say about cults and hyperviolence and the severely negative consequences of both. The last quarter of the movie is really important and shows how it all spirals out of control really badly. And yet so many people, so many young men in particular, came out of the theater thinking, yeah, Fight Club, Project Mayhem, sounds like fun. Or even just, wow, Tyler Durden is so cool. It almost seems like many viewers missed that last very important quarter. But whether I like it or not, that is a major impact the movie had on society. So maybe the, hey, cults are bad lesson is the color theory here. But is that David Fincher's fault? Chuck Palahniuk's fault? Or is it the audience's fault? Breaking Bad is similar in that it's largely about Walter White's descent into becoming a monster. He kills people, scares and assaults his wife, repeatedly manipulates his young partner into doing his bidding, and, of course, becomes drunk on power from developing a meth empire.
Jesse, you asked me if I was in the meth business or the money business. Neither. I'm in the empire business.
Mr. White, is a meth empire really something to be that proud of?
And yet, a significant amount of the reaction was, yeah, I am the danger. So cool. In both Fight Club and Breaking Bad, a major component of the plot is that Tyler Durden and Walter White are charismatic and manipulative. So maybe they were just written too well, in that they manipulated a good portion of the audience as well as the other characters in their stories. But that's a topic for another video. But both stories also end with the main character coming to a certain amount of self-awareness that drives home the lesson intended by the writers, even if not everyone picked up that lesson. And now for a complete tonal shift that still illustrates my point, Paper Towns by John Green. John Green has been accused several times over of falling into the manic pixie dream girl trope in his writing, and perhaps none more so than this book. But the female lead of the book is presented that way because that's how the main character Q views her at first. The rest of the book is spent on him figuring out how untrue that actually is, and the book is actually intended as a criticism of the trope. But I checked in the book to see where I believe the first point is made that even implies that things are not what he thinks they are. And it's not until the end of chapter 6, nearly 60 pages in. I think it's a great book that makes a great point. But I also understand that 6 chapters is a bit of a ways to go to find the start of that point, and many readers may have thrown the book across the room before they got that far. But Is it fair to John Green to say that he has to make his thesis statement in chapter 1 or else his point is relegated to the realm of color theory? So what's the solution? Writers of any type need to be aware of the consequences of the things they write, but they can't really account for every possible misreading of their story. Especially if it's a popular work, the sheer amount of readers or viewers means there will be many, many different interpretations. I talked about this in the video on Dead Poets Society. Everyone takes their life experience, their personal perspective, and combines it with what's in front of them to make their own interpretation. To a certain extent, a writer can't control that. Writing clearly is important, but there's no amount of simplicity that will guarantee that everyone will get the point. Even forgoing writing any of the stories I previously mentioned and instead just blaring red letters on a screen saying, cults and terrorism are bad, don't create a meth empire, women and girls are people, wouldn't work because those statements don't cover the full lessons to be gained, it's not entertaining so no one would be interested, and people would find a way to twist them anyway. If a story requires mental gymnastics to get the intended lesson, you need a better writer. Theorizing about a story's meaning can be fun, just like gymnastics can be fun, but sometimes you can theorize to Nebraska and back, but that doesn't change the bloody imagery the story actually presents. But if the story actually has a really good point that's just cloaked in layers of complexity, we need to be a better audience. The ability to read between the lines and interpret new ideas is important for our understanding of literature, it's important for ourselves, and it's important for society at large. So what do you think of Beauty and the Beast? Do you love it and think it's romantic? Hate it and wish it was never created? What do you think of the need for media literacy? For that and any other opinions, comment below. Kindly, please, we talked about this. But really, all reasoned analysis is welcome. If there's a story or theme you love and want me to talk about, let me know that too. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and you can check my channel description for my posting schedule. And until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and keep digging deeper. Thanks for watching.